Hello you beautiful misfits, Matt here with the third of my E3 2017 Blitzkriegs covering the Bethesda conference. Although calling it a conference seems a bit of a misnomer really, for reasons that will become readily apparent. They did hire a venue for it though, which is more than Nintendo does nowadays. But then Nintendo could carve a press release onto an obsidian monolith, airdrop it into the Rub al Khali, and hordes of people would spank their life savings on expeditions to catch the merest glimpse of it. The entire shebang began with these heartwarming, charming clips of Bethesda developers and the product of their loins, or children as I believe they're more commonly known, although I think some of them might actually be members of Bethesda's quality assurance department. I mean managerial level staff of course, supervisors and whatnot. We all know the real grunt work of Bethesda's QA is done by those poor hard-working schlubs in the chimp enclosure at the Maryland Zoo. This montage was swiftly superseded by another more traditional one featuring a whole bunch of games like Prey, Doom, Dishonored 2, Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 4. Although if you liked the new Prey, as I did, and were expecting more of it from this conference, then, well, you were only setting yourself up to be disappointed, because much like that tiny glimpse of Master Chief at the start of the Xbox show, this was essentially all you would see or hear about Prey at the Bethesda conference. Apart from a brief mention of it by Pete Hines here, who, after a snippet of animation depicting the conference's Bethesda Land theme, stepped out to formally open the proceedings and actually make some use of the stage Bethesda hired, promising an experience at E3 unlike anything else.
We will offer you an experience at E3 unlike anything else.
Touting the conference as a virtual playground with something for everyone, before talking a wee bit more about Doom, Dishonored and, yes, Prey, as well as Fallout Shelter, Fallout 4 and so on and so forth, all of which was mere waffling preamble to Pete Hines pissing on my parade.
Let's start by talking about virtual reality.
Can we not? Nope, Pete was rather insistent about it I'm afraid, immediately dumping some footage for Doom VFR into our laps, like a leaking bag of soggy giblets, and it was a tad underwhelming in all honesty. I'm sure it's probably more engaging if you've got a helmet clamped over your skull, but from my VR-less seat it just looked like a bunch of fiddly teleportation mechanics, and inconsistent pacing. Because instead of gracefully dancing around gore-soaked arenas of pain, working in perfect seamless union with your control method of choice, you're flitting around erratically by means of a teleportation mechanic, which also conveniently slows down time in a fashion that, to my battle-hardened eyeballs, tears out the very heart of the game's pacing and stomps it into a gooey mush. The slower pace of Fallout 4 seemed a much better fit for VR, being as it at least appeared to let you move around like a normal, non-teleporting wizard video game protagonist. Aside from that however, it's basically Fallout 4 all over again, albeit a version you will have to buy separately, at full retail price, because fuck you, Bethesda wants your money again. Now during this part, courtesy of my freakishly sensitive ears, I noticed that the audio had begun to sort of slip out of sync a little bit. It wasn't really an issue in this bit, but it did become particularly noticeable and obnoxious in the next segment, which was itself horribly and inherently obnoxious to begin with. I don't mean the animated Bethesda Land segments by the way, although they did grow to become really rather fucking irritating. Specifically that bloody narrator whose voice made me want to pierce my eardrums with a pen. Nor am I suggesting the unveiled Morrowind expansion for Elder Scrolls Online was itself somehow inherently objectionable. I mean, I don't play Elder Scrolls Online, and if I want a Morrowind fix, I'll play Morrowind, or wait for the Skywind mod to finally come out. But that in itself was not insufferable for me. No, the obnoxiousness quotient of this segment came from the way it was presented, by way of a teeth-grindingly awful collection of various YouTubers reacting to clips from the expansion in that particular kind of overblown, faux excited, inauthentic, doing it for the cash kind of way that makes you scream for an asteroid to gently shepherd our species into oblivion. Leaving aside the issue of this brass centurion looking suspiciously like a Dwemer one, even though the Clockwork City was ruled by Sothersil, who made his own unique clockwork constructs that looked notably different from Dwemer ones because he was a member of the godlike tribunal along with Vivek and Almalexia that drew its power from the heart of Lorcan buried deep within Red Mountain near the slumbering place of Dagoth-Ur, and everyday Bethesda drifts further from Michael Kirkbride's light. The sound desynchronization problems I mentioned previously became a teeny bit more obvious here.
It's gonna be exciting.
I'm pretty excited right now.
Here we go.
Yeah, that's pretty noticeable, isn't it? And this wasn't limited to the version of the conference I'd acquired to watch either. Every other video of the Bethesda conference I've seen has this exact same problem. It even happens on GameSpot's coverage, which I'm totally allowed to use by the way, since Dave here pretty much gave me absolute carte blanche, totally legally binding permission to do so, MacLeod. Now, when you consider this trailer segment, faux reactions and all, was a pre-recorded piece done before the conference and not performed live or anything stupid like that, you have to wonder if Bethesda have maybe merged their media department with their QA team, and if so, are they getting enough bananas? I would like to say we were then mercifully returned to the embrace of Pete Hines after that, but we weren't. Instead, we were strapped into a metaphorical torture chair and subjected to more of the annoying Bethesda Land announcer bloke, posing us such complicated questions as,
did you know that Bethesda's first PC user mods in 2002 were for the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind?
Yes, Mr. Announcer, I did know that. Can you stop talking now, please?
15 years later, Bethesda continues to support the mod community.
Oh, that's cute, Bethesda. Real cute. Nice reference to the really useful Dragons mod for Skyrim there. Pity it's not available on the PS4 version for reasons of copyright and its use of custom assets, eh? Still, don't let that stop you using it to pimp your new paid mod service. Yep, this pre-recorded preamble was to introduce a pre-recorded segment introducing the Creation Club, through which players can purchase new weapons, outfits, armour, accessories and other things through a credit system. In other words, it's Bethesda's second shot at making extra dosh from the blood, sweat and toil of community modders, because they haven't already been passively profiting off the entire mod scene for donkey's years, right? Of course Bethesda are claiming this isn't paid mods because most mods will still be free, which is a bit like saying the United States has universal healthcare because the UK National Health Service is free at the point of use. Purchasing the mods with special Bethesda Magic mod credits you exchange real money for doesn't mean the mods you buy with them aren't paid for. If I exchanged my shiny pound coins for a chicken and then bartered that chicken for a cake, you wouldn't say I'd got a free cake, would you? One little detail they don't clarify, however, is what sort of revenue share modders will get from putting their not paid mods on the Creation Club, although the FAQ does make mention of development milestones. That, to me, suggests a work for hire system whereby a modder surrenders all rights to their work in exchange for getting it, for want of a better term, commissioned by Bethesda as an approved mod. It's still easily better than Bethesda's first crack at paid mods, but I would like to see a sort of royalty system implemented so the creators of mods that really take off in terms of popularity can earn extra rewards for all their hard work. After that came a segment about Elder Scrolls Legends, Bethesda's strategy card game jobby set in the Elder Scrolls universe, which began with the rather bold statement, "In 2016 the legend began," which puzzled me a bit since most of the people I know are playing either Hearthstone or Gwent. Still, Elder Scrolls Legends must have been somewhat popular since the game's getting a full-blown expansion called Heroes of Skyrim, which adds a bunch of Skyrim-related stuff presumably. Moving on. Oh great, even more poxy bloody Skyrim. On the Switch this time, because only almost everybody owns a copy instead of absolutely smegging everybody. Honestly, what do you want me to say? It's Skyrim. It's on the Switch. You can use an amiibo to make your character look like they shouldn't be allowed near local schools. You can play it on a fucking bus. Come on Bethesda, show me something I could actually give a flying rocket powered shit about.
We're gonna kill the outsider.
Ah, now we're talking. Yep, we're getting some more Dishonored 2, kind of, sort of. Dishonored Death of the Outsider is not a DLC as some fans were hoping for, but actually a standalone game. Similar to what Wolfenstein the Old Blood was to Wolfenstein the New Order, which would suggest at least a meaty 6 or so hours of gameplay if you saunter through your first playthrough at a leisurely pace. Perhaps even 9 or 10, if you're the kind of player who spends ages exploring every single nook and cranny for the tiniest crumb of lore written on an in-game beer mat, like I do. Alternatively, it'll be about 2 hours if you rushed through it ignoring everything except killing and mayhem, then moan about it afterwards because fuck environmental storytelling and deep rich world building, right? Sorry, I have some issues to work out. Anyway, as it's a standalone expansion, or expandalone as the youth are calling it these days, you won't need to have played or even owned Dishonored 2 to enjoy it. Although you probably won't have much of a clue about what's going on either. Plus, you'll have missed out on one of my top games of 2016. But I digress. This time around, instead of choosing between Empress Emily Caldwin or Corvo Atano, you're stuck firmly in the boots of Billy Lurk from Dishonored 1's Knife of Dunwall DLC. With a funky magic cyborg eye and arm, as well as new powers, she decides to team up with her old assassin mentor Dowd, voiced by a returning Michael Madsen, to kill the Outsider, the Dishonored universe's version of the devil. Although he's really much more like Nyarlathotep from H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, with a pinch of Loki from Norse mythology for extra spice. Either way, Billy and Dowd have to kill him. Something a few fans won't be very happy about. At all. To come anywhere close to killing him, however, Billy will have to infiltrate an underground fight club, investigate a secretive cult, and at one point, pull off a bank heist. That last one being pretty much the only thing from the Thief series that Dishonored hasn't done yet, and which I weirdly never get tired of in first-person stealth games. There's just something really, really satisfying about cracking a bank security system wide open and plundering their big juicy vaults. As well as all that, you'll also be tangling with the Oracular Order, a religious sisterhood mentioned in Dishonored 1 that fans were looking forward to confronting in Dishonored 2, only to discover they were mostly absent, unless you count dead ones in coffins. Fortunately, they're confirmed to have a more active physical presence in this one, joining other new enemies like these void creatures and a new type of clockwork soldier. Except they're not really new clockwork soldiers, but actually the same creepy porcelain face ones we saw in that first Dishonored 2 reveal trailer. In the finished game, they got changed to these wooden General Grievous lookalikes for an amusing in-game lore reason I won't spoil here. Anyway, I'm fucking stoked for this because it's more Dishonored, and, as most of you know, if the Dishonored franchise had genitals, I would have absolutely no cartilage left in my knees. Although if I have to spend 4 hours tinkering with drivers, settings, .ini files and other crap, just to get this one to load, I will not be a happy neck stabber. After that brief, beautiful spark of excitement in my cold dead heart-inducing joy came another glimpse of Quake Champions, revealed last year. Not quite as thrilling as more Dishonored, for me at least, yet still profoundly more interesting than yet another version of the same Fallout 4 and Skyrim we've already fucking played and paid for. Bookended by a black and white montage of actual real Twitch streamers like Fangs and Hangs here, see, I do my research, were these bite-sized morsels of actual gameplay, which seemed to have the kind of pace you damn well expect from an arena shooter daring to wear the illustrious name of Quake. There was, however, one little thing that, for me, stood out like wasps buzzing around inside a pair of empty tin cans stapled to the sides of my head. Watch this little clip and see if you can guess what's horribly wrong with it.
Try to keep up.
Dubstep? In Quake? What the hell were you thinking, Bethesda? How very dare you, sirs? For shame! For shame, I say! Yet I'm blaming Bethesda's marketing division for this one. id Software would never foist such a travesty upon us. Look, call me old-fashioned, but a Quake without a 100% metal soundtrack is like a Quake without rocket jumping. And they've got that in it. Alright, electro-industrial works too. Or alternatively, a nice spot of classical. Just not fucking dubstep. Another thing I'm not especially keen on is all the different characters having their own Overwatch-style quips and one-liners. Unless they're grunting in pain or screaming in agony, I prefer my Quake characters silent and stoic, thank you very much. Although I'm happy to make an exception for BJ Blazkowicz from Wolfenstein, confirmed to be joining the Quake Champions roster as a bona fide Quake champion.
I'm coming for you, goddamn weirdos!
To which my immediate reaction was, what? No Doom Guy? Alright, Doom Guy will probably also make an appearance in Quake Champions eventually, unless Bethesda insists that id replace him with a hip new original character called Dubstep Chap or something. Old BJ Blazko was most likely unveiled first, here, to serve as a nice and smooth segue to the reveal of Wolfenstein the New Colossus, which came next. And by next I, of course, mean after a reveal for The Evil Within 2. Really, it would have flowed so much better if they'd swapped The Evil Within 2 and Quake Champions around, so you had a nice sort of transition from Quake Champions to the new Wolfenstein. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, you got Blazkowicz there in Quake Champions, and he's that nice little connecting thread going straight onto the new Wolfenstein. But then hindsight is 2020, I suppose. I mean, it's not like Bethesda had the luxury of recording and editing 90% of this conference beforehand, is it? But I digress. out of brain-screwing boredom. The Evil Within 2, in which protagonist Sebastian Castellanos steps once more into a psychotropic nightmarescape that seems to have shed a fair amount, though certainly not all, of its obvious Silent Hill trappings. The tone of this, frankly, quite beautiful looking trailer is more reminiscent of something like Alan Wake, visually and atmospherically, with a marked reduction in tidal waves of steaming red hot jam that's mostly been replaced by a veritable ocean's worth of an unspecified milky white fluid. Don't know why I'm being so coy really, it's your basic sex and death combo, innit? The bacon and eggs of the horror genre. Now, I only ever played a teeny bit of the first one at an expo and I wasn't too keen on it, but I'm happy to see it did well enough to get a sequel. With a really rather beautiful trailer no less. After which we finally got Wolfenstein the New Colossus, sequel to 2014's Wolfenstein the New Order, which opens with a parody of Lassie, where Lassie is instead a robotic Nazi panzerhund called Liesel, along with a quiz show called German or Else, toy adverts and other stuff you could probably slot into an episode of The Man in the High Castle without anyone noticing. This chimp with the head of a cat on the other hand, probably not so much, although it wouldn't be too out of place in any of Philip K. Dick's other works. I mean, one of his books is about a cyborg business tycoon who peddles hallucinogenic drugs made from the corpse of God, which he found floating in space. Because God's an alien. But enough digressing, it's the sequel to Wolfenstein New Order and you're playing as BJ Blazkowicz again, who's looking pretty well considering, spoiler alert, he took a grenade to the face before having an entire fortress dropped on him. He's still feeling a teeny bit under the weather though, which is as good an excuse as any for a segment where you roll around in a wheelchair dual-wielding machine guns. After which, he straps himself into some Jewish power armour, yes that is an actual thing in the series, and takes the fight to Nazi-occupied America, teaming up with a Marxist priest and riding a flame-belching panzerhund to liberate the land of the not quite so free. All of which should hopefully add up to bucket loads of good clean fun and shitloads of dead Nazis. The only good kind of course. Except perhaps Rudolf von Stroheim from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In conclusion, you can definitely chalk this one up as another title alongside Dishonored Death of the Outsider that I'm very much looking forward to playing. Or at least I was, until I saw this bit right at the end, where a young man drops acid and immediately begins hallucinating, even though it usually takes anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour for acid to kick in. So I've been told. Well, that shot my suspension of disbelief right in the bollocks. Literally unplayable. And with that inaccurate depiction of psychedelic drug use, Pete Hines returned to the stage to reiterate that Wolfenstein the New Colossus is
fucking bananas.
Before ending the show with a closing statement he appeared determined to get out in one single breath, lest he exploded or something. Which means it's time to give my verdict. This was easily the worst conference of this year's E3. Slapdash, rushed, and rather underwhelming overall. But Matt, I hear you cry, how can you say Bethesda's was the weakest when EA's was as corporate as ever? Because Bethesda has led us to expect better. When I watch an EA conference, I expect a tedious Sportsageddon and all the usual guff, and yet even they managed to surprise me a bit this year. Bethesda, meanwhile, had put on 2 strong shows in 2 years, so the bar was raised a lot higher, and this is the year they failed to make the jump, so to speak. I had my doubts whether Bethesda could keep delivering a solid conference year after year, and they did well to do too. But we're starting to see the boiler run a bit low here. Was Bethesda's conference absolutely terrible? No, and in any other year it would have ranked higher. This year, however, we had Microsoft, Nintendo, and even Ubisoft, whose conference I'll be covering next, come out with some very strong presentations. While I was pretty stoked for more Dishonored and Wolfenstein, those 2 games weren't enough to carry the whole show on their own. The Evil Within 2 and Quake Champions might have helped had Bethesda shown us a bit more of them, but they didn't. Meanwhile, if you're one of those people who believe VR is the machine god's gift to a wayward species, even you have to balk at the idea of paying full price for Fallout 4 and Skyrim all over again, just to play them in VR. In fact, I'm getting sick of Bethesda still resting on their Skyrim and Fallout laurels, instead of showing us something new. Speaking of which, there was certainly no Elder Scrolls 6, which would have helped make the event feel more like an event. But alas, that wasn't even hinted at. That rumour of something called Starfield, a multiplayer game allegedly set in the very far future of the Elder Scrolls universe, also turned out to be a complete bust. Another complaint I have is that the majority of the show consisted of pre-recorded segments, and yet Bethesda still managed to fuck even that up. With that and Pete Hines being the only flesh and blood human presenting, It all felt like it could have been done as a Nintendo-style online-only affair instead. It certainly wasn't worth Bethesda hiring out such a large venue for. Perhaps most egregious of all, however, more so even than the lack of an Elder Scrolls 6, was a complete gaping absence of any Todd
fucking
Howard to tell me lies. Tell me sweet little lies. So with that conference beaten into a broken mess and thrown atop the corpse pile with the others, it's on to the next one on my list. The Ubisoft conference. However, as I did kind of spoil a wee bit earlier, it was actually quite a surprisingly strong one overall. In fact, I'd even say we're past the worst of E3 now and things can only get better from here. Well, for the most part at least. I mean, it technically wasn't a real conference after all. Anyhow, until next we meet, which hopefully won't be too long since I'd kind of like to get these done before they become completely irrelevant. You can go now.